The vast reaches of space, once teeming with empires vying for power, had settled into a quiet order under the Galactic Council's rule. The Council, comprised of the most advanced and influential species in the galaxy, ensured that no threat could challenge their supremacy. In their eyes, humanity was a minor footnote in the grand galactic narrative, primitive, insignificant, and forgotten. No one in the Council could have predicted what was about to unfold. On the distant planet of Earth, humanity had been left to its own devices for centuries, overlooked by the galactic elite. But in that time, humans had not been idle. Away from prying eyes, they had rebuilt, innovated, and adapted. They had mastered technologies that the Council deemed too advanced for their kind, and they had prepared for the inevitable moment when the galaxy would come knocking. In the heart of Earth's military command center, Admiral Kara Sullivan stood before a massive display screen, her sharp eyes scanning the star maps that detailed the Sol system and the surrounding sectors. The room hummed with quiet anticipation, filled with the soft beeps of communication systems and the murmur of strategists calculating battle scenarios. "How long until the Council's fleet reaches Earth?" Sullivan asked, her voice calm but filled with a cold edge. Commander Bryce, standing to her left, quickly pulled up the latest intel reports. "Less than 48 hours, Admiral. Their flagship is leading the advance. They expect no resistance." Sullivan allowed herself a brief smile. "Of course they don't. They think we're still the weak, fractured species they encountered centuries ago." Price nodded. "They've underestimated us." "They always have," Sullivan replied, turning to face her tactical team. "It's time they learned what we've been doing while they were busy with their petty power struggles." The room was filled with officers and engineers, all focused on their tasks as they prepared for what would be humanity's greatest test. For decades, they had trained in secret, preparing for this very moment. The Aegis Project, humanity's ultimate defense and offense, was ready for activation. It was more than just a weapon, it was a shield and a sword, designed to protect Earth and its colonies while delivering devastating strikes with surgical precision. The Galactic Council's fleet was vast, but it was bloated with arrogance. Their ships were built for intimidation, not for true combat. In contrast, humanity's fleet was smaller but faster, designed for strategic, hit-and-run tactics that would leave their enemies reeling. Sullivan's gaze hardened as she looked back at the star map. "Activate the fleet. We move in 6 hours." In the depths of space, far beyond the reach of the Council's scanners, humanity's warships lay in wait. Sleek and angular, they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, ships designed for speed, stealth, and raw power. Each one bristled with weaponry, their dark hulls blending seamlessly into the blackness of space. Inside the flagship, ironclad, Sullivan's command team was already in position, coordinating with the other ships in the fleet. As the countdown to deployment began, a sense of calm determination filled the air. Every member of the crew knew what was at stake. "They think they're walking into an easy victory," Price said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "They'll be walking into a graveyard if they're not careful," Sullivan replied, her tone as cold as the void around them. The Galactic Council had forgotten about humans. But they were about to be reminded violently. As the hours ticked down to the Council fleet's arrival, the tension aboard the ironclad grew thick. Admiral Kara Sullivan stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the vast expanse of stars that stretched endlessly before them. The calm before the storm. "Their advanced ships will breach the outer perimeter soon," said Lieutenant Harper, the communications officer. "They're moving faster than anticipated." Sullivan remained composed. "Good. Let them come." The Galactic Council believed themselves invincible, their power unmatched across the galaxy. What they didn't realize was that humanity had been preparing for this day for decades. The Aegis Project was not just a defensive strategy, it was a symbol of human resilience, of their ability to rise from the ashes time and time again. In the briefing room, Commander Bryce and the tactical team worked tirelessly to refine their battle plans. Holographic displays of the approaching Council fleet hovered in the air, each ship marked with detailed statistics. The Council's fleet was massive, hundreds of warships, each one carrying enough firepower to obliterate entire planets. But they were slow, cumbersome, and most of all, arrogant. "They have no idea what's waiting for them," Bryce muttered, scanning the display. Lieutenant Sarah Quinn, the fleet's chief engineer, stood beside him. Their technology is advanced, but they rely too much on brute force. Our ships are faster, more agile. We'll hit them before they even know we're there. Price nodded. We'll need to stay one step ahead. The moment they realize what we're capable of, they'll adapt. Quinn smiled faintly. By then, it'll be too late. Meanwhile, on board the Council flagship, High Commander Valens sat in his grand chair, gazing out at the stars with a look of disdain. Humanity was a minor nuisance, a primitive race that should have been crushed long ago. Yet, the Council had allowed them to fester, believing them no threat to their rule. Now, as Valen watched the data streams detailing their approach to Earth, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling. A faint itch at the back of his mind. Something was off. But it didn't matter. His fleet was unstoppable. Whatever resistance the humans had mustered would be swept aside like dust. Commander, one of Valen's aides approached. We are approaching the Sol system. No signs of resistance detected so far. Valen grunted. They'll throw whatever scraps they have at us. It won't matter. Prepare the first wave of bombardment as soon as we're within range. Back aboard the ironclad, the moment had come. The proximity alarms began to blare softly, signaling the Council fleet's arrival. Sullivan stood tall, her hands clasped behind her back as she addressed her crew. Today, they'll learn that humans are not to be underestimated. We are not prey. We are the hunters now. Activate Project Aegis. Across the human fleet, energy shields flared to life, an invisible barrier, decades in the making, designed to withstand the most powerful attacks in the galaxy. At the same time, the human ships moved into position, spreading out across the Sol system like shadows in the dark. Stealth systems active, Quinn reported, her voice steady. They won't see us until it's too late. Sullivan nodded. Commander Bryce, initiate the first strike. With a single command, the ironclad and its fleet launched a coordinated assault. Their ships moved with blinding speed, darting through the void like phantoms. The Council's lead ships didn't stand a chance. Before they could react, the human warships had already targeted their engines, crippling them in an instant. Explosions lit up the blackness of space as the Council fleet scrambled to respond, but it was chaos. The humans struck with ruthless precision, targeting key systems, disabling ships before they could even raise their shields. Commander Valen's flagship is still holding back, Bryce said, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Sullivan's lips curled into a predatory smile. Let them wait. They think they're in control. They have no idea what's coming. The humans continued their assault, slipping in and out of the Council's formation like ghosts, wreaking havoc at every turn. It was the perfect display of human ingenuity, strategic, calculated, and devastating. As the battle raged on, the Council fleet began to falter. Panic spread through their ranks. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. Instead, they were facing a nightmare. And humanity was just getting started. The once serene darkness of space had turned into a cacophony of explosions and fire. Human warships moved like phantoms, weaving between the Council's behemoth vessels, striking at their weakest points with terrifying precision. Where the Council relied on overwhelming force, humanity wielded strategy like a sharpened blade. Admiral Kara Sullivan watched the unfolding chaos from the bridge of the ironclad. Her face remained impassive, but deep inside, she felt a surge of pride. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity for the last time. They're losing formation, Commander Bryce reported, his voice filled with restrained excitement. We've disabled over 20 ships so far. They're scrambling. They were never prepared for this, Sullivan replied calmly, her eyes fixed on the star map displaying the battlefield. They expected a weak defense, not a calculated assault. The human fleet had done exactly as planned, striking swiftly, disabling key ships, and throwing the Council's forces into disarray. But this was only the beginning. Commander, what's the status of Valen's flagship? Sullivan asked. Price tapped a few buttons, bringing the massive Council flagship into view. It was an imposing sight, larger than any other vessel in the fleet, bristling with weaponry and armor. "They're holding back, still outside the main battle," Price replied. "It looks like they're waiting for something." Sullivan narrowed her eyes. "They're waiting for us to make a mistake. But we won't." On board the Council flagship, High Commander Valen watched in disbelief as his fleet crumbled before his eyes. This was not how it was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be a minor obstacle, a nuisance at best. Yet here they were, dismantling his ships with terrifying efficiency. "High Commander, we need to act now," one of his aides said urgently. "The fleet is falling apart." Valen clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on his tactical brilliance, his ability to anticipate every move his enemies would make. But these humans, they fought differently. They were unpredictable, chaotic. And they were winning. "Order the remaining ships to fall back," Valen commanded, his voice cold. "We'll regroup and launch a full-scale assault." As the remaining Council ships began to retreat, the humans pursued relentlessly, pressing their advantage. Valen watched, his frustration growing with each passing second. He needed to regain control of the situation. And fast. "Prepare the helix cannon," Valen ordered. The helix cannon was the most powerful weapon in the Council's arsenal, a devastating beam of energy capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single shot. It had never been used in combat before. Valen had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but he saw no other choice. Charge the weapon. Target the human fleet. Back on the ironclad, alarms blared as the sensors detected a massive energy buildup aboard the Council flagship. "Admiral, they're charging a weapon, a big one," Price said, his voice tense. "It's off the charts." Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "It's the helix cannon." The helix cannon was a weapon of legend, whispered about in the darkest corners of the galaxy. No one had ever seen it in action, but its reputation was enough to send chills down the spine of even the most hardened soldiers. "If they fire that thing, it could wipe out the entire fleet," Price said, his tone grim. Sullivan's mind raced. She had anticipated every move the Council would make except this. The helix cannon was an unknown factor, a wild card that could change the course of the battle in an instant. But she wasn't about to let the Council claim victory. Not today. "Activate the Aegis shields at full power," Sullivan ordered. "Every ship. We need to be ready." Across the human fleet, the energy shields flared to life, glowing with a brilliant intensity as they absorbed the full brunt of the Council's attacks. But Sullivan knew that the helix cannon was something else entirely. Even the Aegis shields might not be enough to withstand its power. On board the Council flagship, the air crackled with anticipation as the helix cannon powered up. The crew worked frantically, their fingers flying over controls as they prepared to unleash the weapon's devastating energy. Valen stood at the center of it all, his eyes locked on the human fleet in the distance. "This ends now," he muttered, his hand hovering over the firing controls. "Cannon fully charged, High Commander," one of the technicians reported. "Awaiting your command." Valen's lips curled into a cold smile. "Fire." The helix cannon roared to life, a massive beam of energy erupting from the flagship and cutting through the void with terrifying speed. It hurtled toward the human fleet like a vengeful god, unstoppable and merciless. On the ironclad, Sullivan watched as the helix cannon fired, her heart pounding in her chest. The beam of energy was like nothing she had ever seen, a blinding, searing light that seemed to tear through space itself. "Shields at maximum power," Price called out, his voice strained. "Brace for impact." Sullivan shouted. The helix cannon's beam slammed into the Aegis shields, sending shockwaves rippling through the fleet. For a moment, everything was chaos. Alarms blared, consoles sparked, and the crew struggled to maintain control. But the Aegis shields held. Barely. Sullivan gritted her teeth. "They want to play with fire? Then let's burn them." "Commander Price," she said, her voice icy. "Prepare the fleet for counterattack." The shockwave from the helix cannon's blast had barely subsided, but Admiral Sullivan wasted no time. The Galactic Council had just revealed their trump card, but they had underestimated the resilience of humanity once again. "Status report," she barked, her eyes fixed on the flashing readouts across the bridge. Commander Price steadied himself, glancing at the damage reports. Shields are holding, but barely. We've taken significant damage, but nothing critical. Sullivan exhaled, her breath fogging the cool air for a moment. They hit us with their best shot, and we're still standing. Now, it's our turn. The Council's fleet had slowed their advance after the Helix cannon's attack, uncertain whether humanity could recover. But that hesitation would be their downfall. Prepare the fleet for counterattack, Sullivan commanded. Target the flagship. I want them to know that they've lost control. On board the Council flagship, High Commander Valen stared at the human fleet with disbelief. The Helix cannon, their ultimate weapon, had failed to wipe them out. His mind struggled to comprehend how this could be possible. High Commander, they're preparing a counterattack, one of the officers shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Valen slammed his fist onto the control panel, the sharp pain barely registering in his fury. How can this be? We should have obliterated them. But the humans were not finished. Their ships, though battered and damaged, were moving with renewed purpose. They were relentless, each ship positioning itself for a devastating strike against the Council's flagship. Valen's arrogance had blinded him to the truth: humans were not just another race to conquer. They were survivors, fighters. And now, they were coming for him. Divert all power to the shields, Valen ordered, his voice cold and desperate. We cannot let them breach our defenses. The ironclad led the charge, its sleek form cutting through space like a dagger. Human ships flanked it on both sides, moving in perfect synchronization as they closed in on the Council's flagship. This was what humanity had prepared for, the moment when they would turn the tide of battle and seize victory. Target the weak points in their shields, Price advised, his fingers flying across the tactical controls. They're diverting all power to protect their flagship, but it'll leave their flanks vulnerable. Sullivan nodded. All ships, focus fire on those weak points. We bring them down together. The human fleet opened fire, a barrage of energy beams and missiles tearing through space. The Council ships struggled to keep up, their defenses crumbling under the coordinated assault. One by one, the smaller Council vessels fell, consumed by fire and debris, as the human fleet pushed forward. Sullivan's gaze never wavered from the target. We end this now. The Council flagship shuddered violently as the human attack intensified. Valen's crew scrambled to maintain control, but it was a losing battle. The humans were relentless, their strikes precise and devastating. We're losing power to the shields, one of the technicians shouted, fear evident in his voice. If this keeps up, we won't be able to hold them off. Valen's chest tightened. He had always believed in the superiority of the Galactic Council, in the invincibility of their fleet. But now, as the walls of his flagship began to collapse around him, he realized that he had made a grave mistake. They won't stop, Valen muttered to himself, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. They'll never stop. On the ironclad, Sullivan watched as the Council's defenses crumbled. This was it, the moment humanity had waited for. The Galactic Council, once believed to be unbeatable, was on the verge of collapse. Admiral, their shields are down, Price announced triumphantly. Sullivan's lips curled into a determined smile. All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship. Let's finish this. The human fleet unleashed everything they had, pouring their firepower into the Council's flagship. The massive ship groaned under the pressure, its hull cracking and splintering as explosions rocked its core. Inside, Valen could only watch in horror as his ship was torn apart. The invincible Galactic Council had been brought to its knees by a race they had once deemed unworthy of their attention. The final explosion engulfed the flagship in a blinding light, the shockwave rippling through space as the remnants of the Council fleet scattered in panic. As the smoke cleared and the stars once again filled the void, a quiet calm settled over the battlefield. The Galactic Council's flagship was gone, reduced to nothing more than debris floating in the vast expanse. Admiral Sullivan stood in silence, her gaze sweeping across the scene. Humanity had done the impossible, they had turned the tide of battle and defeated one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But she knew this was just the beginning. We've won this battle, Sullivan said, her voice low but filled with resolve. But the war is far from over. The wreckage of the Council's flagship drifted silently through space, its once mighty form reduced to little more than floating debris. The stars bore witness to the end of an empire's arrogance, and yet, the battle was far from over. On the bridge of the ironclad, Admiral Kara Sullivan surveyed the destruction. Her crew had fought with precision and unyielding resolve, but she knew the Galactic Council was not one to surrender easily. "Status report, Commander Price," she ordered, her voice steady but sharp. Price quickly scanned the tactical displays. "Their remaining ships are retreating, Admiral. We've broken their lines, but they're regrouping in the outer sectors." Sullivan nodded, her mind already calculating the next move. "They'll be back. They can't afford to let this stand." Humanity's victory over the Council's fleet was monumental, but it was also dangerous. This battle had exposed humanity's strength, and now the galaxy would take notice. There would be no more hiding, no more flying under the radar. The game had changed, and humanity was now a player on the galactic stage. "We need to strike before they recover," Sullivan said, turning to face her crew. "If we give them time to regroup, they'll come at us with everything they have." Price stepped forward. "Our fleet sustained damage, Admiral. We need to reinforce our defenses." "Not yet," Sullivan replied firmly. "We've dealt them a critical blow, but we need to finish this now, before they have the chance to retaliate." In the outer sectors of the Sol system, the remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet limped away from the battlefield. Panic spread among the ranks, their communications filled with frantic orders and desperate pleas for reinforcements. On one of the retreating ships, Admiral Zara Voss, a seasoned council officer, struggled to maintain control. She had watched in horror as the Council's flagship had been destroyed, the symbol of their dominance shattered before her eyes. "How could this have happened?" Voss muttered, her fists clenched in frustration. "How did we lose to them?" Her second-in-command, Captain Rylas, stood beside her, equally shaken. "The humans, they fought like nothing we've ever seen. They've adapted. We weren't prepared." Voss turned to face Rylas, her eyes burning with fury. "We underestimated them. That was our mistake." As the Council's surviving ships regrouped, Voss knew they were vulnerable. Their forces had been decimated, and they lacked the firepower to mount a full-scale counterattack. "We need to fall back and request reinforcements from the core worlds," Rylas suggested. "We're in no condition to face them again." Voss shook her head. "No. We can't retreat any further. If we fall back now, we'll lose our foothold in this sector. We need to hold the line." But even as she spoke the words, Voss knew the situation was dire. The humans had proven themselves to be far more formidable than the Council had ever imagined. On board the ironclad, Sullivan's plan was already in motion. The human fleet, though battered and bruised, was ready to deliver the final blow. There would be no mercy, no hesitation. The time for survival had passed, now it was time for conquest. "Commander Price," Sullivan said, her voice filled with cold determination. "Prepare the fleet for the final strike. We're ending this." Price nodded, his hands moving swiftly across the control panel. "All ships, prepare for assault. Target the remaining Council ships. We're taking them out." Across the human fleet, ships began to mobilize, their engines roaring to life as they moved into position. The Council's remnants would not escape. Not this time. Sullivan's gaze hardened as she watched the tactical display. "This is it. We either crush them here, or we give them the chance to strike back." There was no room for doubt. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. Now, they would show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The final assault came swiftly and without mercy. Human warships descended upon the Council's retreating fleet like a pack of wolves, tearing through their ranks with ruthless efficiency. The Council's defenses crumbled under the relentless barrage, their ships unable to withstand the precision and power of the human attack. On board her ship, Admiral Voss watched in horror as her forces were annihilated. One by one, the Council's vessels were destroyed, their once mighty fleet reduced to burning wreckage. This can't be happening," Voss whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was happening. The Galactic Council, once thought invincible, was being brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. As the final council ship exploded in a blinding flash of light, Sullivan allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done it. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had defeated the Galactic Council. But the victory came with a heavy weight. The galaxy would not ignore this. Humanity had revealed its strength, and there would be consequences. "Admiral, the Council fleet has been neutralized," Bryce reported, his voice filled with awe. "It's over." Sullivan stood tall, her eyes fixed on the stars. "No, Commander. This is just the beginning."